Your death already knows how you're going to die. It's been waiting your whole life, since the second you were born, patient, quiet, certain. It doesn't need a weapon, it doesn't need a reason, it just needs to find you.
It's here.
5 teenagers in a town called Pellington found an ancient whistle. And one of them blew it. One whistle just told your death to stop waiting. Your death gets your coordinates. Chris didn't move to Pellington by choice. She moved because there was nowhere left to go. 6 months ago, she overdosed. Her father found her and drove her to the hospital, and a truck hit their car on the way. He didn't make it. She did. That guilt has been pressed against her chest ever since, and she carries it into every room she enters. She moved into new school with her cousin Rel. Rel is warm and loud, and exactly what Chris doesn't feel she deserves. At Pellington High, she spots one person who doesn't fit the usual categories. Ellie, quiet, thoughtful. Then a dead student's locker gets assigned to her. A basketball star named Mason, gone 6 months ago, cause of death listed as flu. A basketball game, he takes the final shot, and something catches his eye in the crowd. A burned figure, watching from the stands, reaching toward him. He blinks, the figure vanishes, the ball goes in, he rushes to his locker. The burned figure appears again, closer this time. Mason grabs a kettlebell and smashes the urn to the floor. The footsteps stop. Later, in the school showers, steam filling the room, Mason finally lets himself believe it's over. Then, the burn man appears one last time. Dean watches from outside. His best friend burns alive. Inside Mason's old locker, an ancient ceramic urn. Inside the urn, a small carved bone whistle, covered in script nobody can read on sight. Chris almost blows it in the hallway. Almost. The bell saves her. But the whistle lands in detention. Their teacher, Mr. Craven, examines the carving and translates pieces aloud. Kaba Pixon. Grace types it and reads the result without blinking. Summon the dead. Craven immediately dismisses everyone early like a man who just found something worth money. Craven blows the whistle that night alone in his empty classroom just to verify it functions. By morning, he is dead. Grace throws a pool party. Dean dares Grace to blow it. Chris says no. Ellie backs her. But Grace has never had a real reason to take fear seriously, and she isn't about to start. She lifts it to her lips. Nothing visible happens. Dean laughs. The party continues. But something heard it. Something that was already searching and now has a target. 3 people blew that whistle before the night was over. 3 deaths were summoned. Mason's grandmother, Ivy, lives in a house that smells like incense and grief. Every room holds something dark, artifacts collected from cultures. She calls them memento mori. When Chris shows her the whistle, Ivy doesn't flinch. She calls it Inchoka, the cry, a stolen relic taken from a plundered people. She corrects their translation. It doesn't summon the dead, it summons your death. Every person is born alongside their death. But the whistle screams your location across time. Your death stops walking and starts running. Chris asks what death looks like. Ivy looks straight at her. Like you, what you would have been in your last breath. Chris asks what happens if someone refuses to die, then you should never have been born. And that's when Chris sees it, standing in the corner of the room where the light doesn't quite reach. A figure, her own face, but older, wrecked. The version of herself that was supposed to die the night of the overdose, before her father got there in time. It doesn't move, it just looks at her. For a moment, she and her death simply stare at each other. Then, Ellie touches her arm. Ellie and Chris break into the hospital's medical records room and pull Mason's coroner's file. Cause of death, fire. Dental records used to confirm identity because the body was unrecognizable. Bone density and skeletal analysis consistent with someone in their late 40s. Mason was 17. Mason was fated to die in his 40s. The whistle pulled his death 30 years forward, and his body aged to match the moment fate had always assigned him. Craven's lung cancer was always going to kill him eventually. The whistle just collapsed the timeline. They sprint for the Harvest Festival to warn the others. They are already too late. Inside the hay bale maze, Grace plays a game with Dean. She goes in, he counts down, then hunts her. She runs, she laughs, she turns a corner. An old woman is standing there calling her name. Grace assumes it's part of the attraction. Then the woman moves wrong. Grace grabs a shovel and swings it, and the moment the impact lands on the woman's temple, an identical wound opens on Grace's own head. Grace reaches the bell and rings it. Chris, Ellie, and Rel rush in. The old woman was Grace, what she would have been at the natural end of her life, finally catching the girl who called it to her early. She's 18. She was meant to live decades more. The whistle didn't just summon her death, it sent it back to collect. Grace is gone. Dean can't handle what he saw. He shoves Rel to the ground and says the meanest thing a scared person can say, that someone like Rel could never end up with a girl like Grace. Then he goes home. Chris and Ellie sit with Rel for a while. Eventually they end up alone on a porch. Chris tells her all of it. The overdose, her father finding her, the truck, how she listens to his vinyl records not because she particularly loves the music, but because it's the only way she can still feel him in the room. Ellie listens without trying to fix a single word of it. Then she leans in and kisses her. Chris pulls back, nervous, laughing a little at herself. Chris doesn't fully understand it, but she kisses her back. Out on the terrace, Rel sits alone, and a vision hits without warning. Himself. Inside the steel factory, he sees exactly how he dies, but he does not tell them. While returning home, he locks his door, sits in the dark. The figure appears in the corner. He switches the light on. It vanishes. His dad knocks, asks if he's been drinking, warns him not to drink and drive. Could very well be the death of you, he says. Dean was always meant to die in a car crash. When the figure returns and touches him, his body breaks the way metal breaks at highway speed, every bone crumpling through the pattern of an impact that was always decided. His parents break down the door and find him. Dean spent his whole life using cruelty as armor, daring people, keeping everything at arm's length. But his death didn't come for him because he blew the whistle. It came because Grace did, and he was standing right there. You don't have to be the one who calls it. Sometimes being close enough is all it takes. Grief makes people calculate things they couldn't normally justify. Rel goes back to Ivy's words. Mark your blood on someone else. Redirect the death. Offer a substitute. He kidnaps Noah, the drug dealer with blood already on his hands, drags him to the steel factory, and ties him to a chair. Cuts his palm. Prepares to make the transfer. Chris and Ellie arrive in time to stop him. Rel breaks down, shaking, asking how someone like Noah gets to keep living while people like them die for nothing. He can't go through with it. Before Chris can respond, the machinery pulls Rel in. Seconds, he is gone. Something in what Rel said clicks for Chris. She has a plan. It's dangerous, it might not work, and they have absolutely no margin for error. If death needs to find you alive to collect you, stop your heart. Cross the threshold. Come back before it realizes. Ellie knows the chemistry. A precise combination of medication and cold exposure can stop a heart long enough to register as death without causing brain damage. They set up a defibrillator, an ice bath, 2 carefully measured doses. Chris insists on going first. Inside the near-death space, she comes face to face with her own death, the version of herself that should have died the night of the overdose if her father hadn't found her in time. Ellie's voice pulls her back. Noah regains consciousness, finds a gun, and breaks in firing. He grazes Ellie. She bleeds. She does not stop compressions. She calls Chris's name until Chris gasps back into the room. Noah raises the gun again, ranting about God and purpose and redemption, and his own death summoned when Grace blew that whistle reaches him right there in that factory. He sees it, fires into nothing. And just like that, dude was done. 3 months later, Chris and Ellie are together. Not perfectly healed, nobody processes that kind of loss in 90 days, but present, choosing each other every morning, which after everything they survived is the only definition of living that means anything anymore. Then, the story cuts to a freshman named Asha. First day, new locker. Inside the locker, the urn. Inside the urn, the whistle. She's called to the assembly stage to perform the national anthem. She's a musician. She steps to the microphone, lifts the whistle to her lips, and blows. We don't just recap movies here, we find what they say about us. Subscribe so you're here for the next one.